Welcome, everyone, to this webinar entitled A Monkey on My Back. I got inspired to do this topic when I realized that so many people have a feeling that there's been something often throughout their life, although it could be for a shorter period, but often throughout their life, they've had this feeling that there was something weighing them down, holding them back, keeping them from manifesting what they wanted in their lives. For some people, it's a relatively small thing. The topic really applies to just about everybody. For some people, it's just, oh, I have trouble, we'll say, phoning business associates, people I need to contact, or making appointments, or contacting elected officials, city folks, whatever, about problems, maybe with their home or their water or something like that. So some people have trouble with that kind of a communication. Or you may have trouble making decisions, particularly larger decisions about money, buying a car, for instance, or, a house, or even changing apartments, where significant amount of money change hands. I find myself, I can do it, but there's always a sort of like, oh my goodness, the size of that check is just not something I'm used to. And I bought a property earlier this year, and now I'm building, and there's going to be a whole bunch of pretty sizable checks written, and juggling all of that money. I can do that. That's not a problem. It's just there's a certain feeling about the enormity of it and the significance of it. And I've been a person who, for better or worse, has been kind of person who watched every penny. And now it's going to be like, we're going to have some zeros, at the end of those numbers, that you can push this into a much larger category. So it can be little things like that, or it can be kind of major stuff about relationships, or career choices or job choices, or other kinds of situations where there's something that keeps us from being able to comfortably follow through on something we want. And so we may wind up putting things off and putting things off. So we procrastinate, and it can be on, a real procrastinator procrastinates on almost everything. But sometimes it's very selective. It's only certain things that bother us. And so this topic really does apply very, very broadly. Essentially, everybody has something in their life that, or some kind of thing in their life that represents a challenge to them. And so when I framed the questions for this, I wrote things like, what can you do about a long-standing feeling that something has been weighing you down or holding you back from living your full, happy, healthy, successful life? We usually don't have any sense of what we can do about it. We think it's just innate to us. It's us. And it's just how we see the world. It's frustrating. It's hard to even imagine that it could be any different. Hard to deal with it in any particular way. I asked the question, have you felt that throughout your life you had a monkey on your back? Oftentimes, this kind of thing feels like there's literally a physical weight back here between the shoulder blades, or it could be lower down or higher up, but it's typically like there literally is a weight on your back. And it's not that you're often aware of it, but you realize that certain kinds of things just don't get done or are very, very difficult. So procrastination is a big thing. Or sometimes it's that you waste time on self-indulgent things. Maybe you get on Facebook and you spend 2 or 3 hours, or you engage in repetitive behaviors, where you just spend time making sure that everything's okay. And it can be a full-blown, kind of checking the locks on the doors repeatedly, or making sure that the water fountains the water spigots are shut off, you know, or even that the toilet was flushed. I've heard of that. Um, Not my problem. But you know, that, you know, you just like you have to keep verifying things that you're just not sure. So it could be that kind of obsessive kind of thinking and compulsive behaviors, or it may be just much more mild that you just kind of just like put your time in where it doesn't need to be, or you either dwell on things that worry you or on things that take your mind off of things that worry you. Pardon me, or that make you sad. Excuse me, I'm going to take a little drink. But if you think about it, almost everybody has certain what we call avoidance behaviors, where you do something that you enjoy or at least marginally enjoy, rather than do something that it's not even that you don't enjoy it, it's just that doing it makes you uncomfortable, or even approaching doing it. A lot of times, once you get to doing it, it actually goes okay. But many times it's just a resistance to undertaking tasks or things. So it may be things that you could worry about, but it also could be things that make you sad. You just avoid certain kinds of situations. There are people who will not go to funerals, for instance, or will not watch sad movies or movies that have tragedy in them, or suffering. And a lot of people, for instance, won't watch even animal movies where the animals are suffering. You know, some of these nature movies or conservation movies, or you know, environmental concern type movies. It's just too much for you. You just stay away from that kind of stuff. So it can be things that you avoid doing, or things that you do to avoid the things that you don't want to do, and get tied up in those. And oftentimes that winds up costing us sleep. You know, we'll stay up and it's like, oh, well, I'll just do one more. I'll watch one more video on YouTube. Guilty. Um, you know, just sometimes it's like you just need a little bit more goody. Sometimes it's, you know, eating food, particularly sweets. And it may come, you know, late at night, but it may just come whenever a problem hits you. Um, I have a certain difficulty with business type people. That's the people who only think in terms of profit and gain for themselves. And they don't really care very much about what it takes to get it, often to some degree. That is, they're willing to ignore other people's feelings. They're not trying to make everybody in the room comfortable. If you are in a situation with them, they may just say, well, this is how I want it. And I can remember situations with some business people where they tell me what they wanted. And then a few days later, they want more. And a few days later, they want more. And it just kept going like that. And I just have a hard time dealing with it. I don't know what to say or what to do about it. And, you know, I can say, well, now, you know, this is what I thought we had agreed to, and this is what I want. And then it gets into a power contest. And again, that's the core of what I really, by personally, am not particularly interested in confronting, you know, is people's power trip. And I tend to just avoid it, rather than deal with it. And so when situations like that come up, um, I often find myself spending time doing other stuff. And then finally, of course, you know, things come due and I go like, I really need to sit down and deal with this. So sometimes you can overcome things like that. But for a lot of these patterns that are well established, these monkeys that have been on our backs, so to speak, whether it feels that way or not, um, pardon me, a lot of times we we really need some help recognizing what it is that's going on. And tonight I'm going to take us through a procedure, and I'll discuss it here briefly, before we get into the group clearing session, you know, the part where I actually do some work on everybody who attends the webinar. I'm going to just describe a little bit about how we can approach this, because I think it's really important. as a life lesson for everyone that instead of feeling powerless to these things and just that sense of, well, this is just me, it's like, no, we can actually do stuff. We can deal with these things if we're willing to recognize them when they come up and be with them so that we can transform them and get through that. And I'm going to make this one very personal when I go through this in a little bit. But I wanted to say, and I'm going to do it here because I'm a little bit concerned that I'm going to forget it. The monkeys on our backs are usually things that either we brought into this life with us, and they're kind of part of our life lessons, what we need to learn to deal with in this life. But sometimes they involve energies that we acquire in life, and that can be from our home environment and our parenting and our school environment. I'm certainly aware of certain things in my life that my parents, shall we say, gave to me as ways of, dealing with stuff. But I'm also aware that a fair number of those things actually occurred in school, where teachers were, I would say, insensitive, certainly insensitive to me. I don't know about other people, but where I felt picked on and maybe criticized even by teachers. And I certainly could rattle off any number of occasions or teachers. There are certain teachers that was just their nature, obviously. But there were certain situations I got myself into, excuse me, where there was some, feedback, shall we say, from the teacher that wasn't very pleasant. I'll digress just a little bit with a story about that kind of thing, where there was a situation where I encountered a teacher, and I confess I did something that was not so typical of me. A teacher asked me not to do something I was undertaking, something I was doing. And my sense was it was perfectly legitimate what I was doing, and it was no big deal. And I kind of just said that to the teacher. I said, this is just returning this thing, and don't, And the teacher said, no, you don't do that. And I said, no, it's the way it's supposed to be, or something like that. And I just went and did it. And next thing I know, I'm called to the vice principal's office. I had never had a direct encounter with the vice principal. I hope this story is evoking some memories in some of you. But what happened was the vice principal said, you really can't talk to teachers the way you spoke to that teacher, and so on and so forth. And he went on for a little while, and I just sat there because there was nothing I needed to say. And finally, he paused, and it was a significant pause. It wasn't just a moment. It was like he stopped and he looked at me, and he just looked at me for a while. I have no idea how long it was, but it was long enough that it was a, dramatic pause. And he said, so what actually happened up there? It was on the second floor, so that's what the up there meant. And so I told him the story. I just told him what happened, and concluded with, if a person wants to make a fool of themselves, it's not really my duty to stop them. Because it had been rather embarrassing for the teacher because it was in front of a class. And the vice principal understood, God bless him, which I thought was a rare thing. Like I said, I'd never had an encounter with him before. And he just looked at me and said, there's nothing I can do. This is what the consequences are of what you've done. And I went like, yep, I understand. And so that was that. And then later I worked out that I could make an apology, and, my status was restored. And so it was okay. But patterns of behavior like that, where most of the time I would not stand up in that way, and confront an authority figure, a teacher. But it certainly was part of my nature. And when a situation arose where I just thought it was just too ridiculous, I just went ahead and, you know, I'm sorry, I made the guy look bad, and that's not the way I usually treat people. And I actually wasn't intending to make him look bad. I was only intending not to give in to him. And we worked it out eventually. So things that hold us back, the monkeys on our back. Most of those are our own thing, something we may have learned in this lifetime or before. But every once in a while, I encounter a situation where a person is having significant difficulty in one way or another. And when I go in and look, usually what happens is I go in and you want to know what I mean when I go in, it means I'm tuning into a person's energy field. So I'm going into their field and I go like, I don't see anything. And what that tells me is there's something there that does not want to be seen. And that's already interesting information, right? Something is there that doesn't want to be seen. So whether it's a person's monkey or it occasionally happens, it's something else. It's not their energy, but it's affecting their energy. And this is where, as far as I'm concerned, it gets very interesting, kind of peculiar, but very interesting. Because it may be energy that has come to them in one of several forms, but the two forms that, just to make this presentation fairly coherent, it's either something that is just benignly slipped into their field or something that was not benignly present, that was actually maliciously present. And I've told a story many times of working with someone, and I got a sense that, I got this sense that there was this hiding going on. Something didn't want to be seen. And so I waited and watched, and finally I began to get a sense. It's a little like when say a 3-year-old is hiding from you. They're not that hard to find, but they may not be immediately visible. So they usually eventually, you get a sense of here they are. So I found that there was something there. And as I sat with that and became more and more aware of it, I was aware that this was definitely a sinister energy form that was basically attacking, if you will. This person was trying to control them and take them over and make them suffer. There was a definite evil intent, you could say. And so that kind of entity you cannot really negotiate with. That one you got to kind of assert that it needs to leave. And not because you're appealing to some benevolent nature, but it's basically saying, I'm kicking you out, which is an interesting role to play, frankly. I'm doing this on the subtle level. And I'm not saying anything out loud, but I'm having this, kind of confrontation with this feisty little being. And so I was working with this being, and it was not going to go. It just wasn't going to move. And I was running out of tricks to get it out. So I asked for, divine assistance in this matter. I just basically told my guides I needed help. Let's ask for, some divine intervention here. And within just moments of my making that request, there was a brilliant flash of lightning. It followed instantaneously by an incredibly loud clap of thunder. So the lightning had come down very near to where I was. It was in my house, actually, the one I'm not in anymore. And there was this blam. And I looked, and that entity was gone. So we got some help on that one, and that felt really good. And then I had to work with the person a little bit to help them appreciate that they were no longer bound by this energy. And so, they had to come to a joy and appreciate what it was to actually be free. Because that's not something, when it's been there for a long time, that's not something that's immediately apparent to somebody most of the time. And then there was another example I had fairly recently, where I was scanning somebody and just checking their energy, their chakras, starting at the bottom and working my way up. And I got stuck. My scan wouldn't go any higher. And I went like, ooh, something is here. There's something interesting. And so I looked into that and became aware that there was the presence of some foreign energy. And I'm pretty sure that that was some form of what in the field we call a disincarnate, which means a person who has died essentially, it's a ghost, if you will, who is hanging around and who found a nervous system that was accessible to them, that they could hide in, so to speak, and thus live out or continue to live an existence, even though they dropped their own body. They're basically, at least to some degree, usurping their body. And this had been present apparently for a very long time. And so I had again, on the subtle level, just mentally, but not speaking it out, a conversation with this entity about why they were there and what their life had been and what they needed, and was able to persuade them that residing in this person that they had chosen was really not fair and was actually not helping them, and that to proceed in their evolution, they needed to let go and move on, and that the good things would await them, that they would have opportunities for further evolution if they let go. And they did. And the entity left, and there was joy all around. Yeah, it was much better. And and the client related, they could feel that there was a lightening, that there was like this load had been taken off their back, and now have to learn to live with that freedom and no longer being held down and restricted by that energy. So that would be our goal. So the main approach that we're going to use, and I'll put that in this presentation part of the webinar, and then we'll use it actually as individually or together in the group clearing session, is that we're going to say hello to those uncomfortable feelings, that sense that something's weighting us down or holding us back, impeding our progress. And we're going to look at that. We're going to say hello to it and look at it without any judgment or condemnation, without any sense that you got to go away. It's just that, oh, you're here, just that you're present. And I'm here with you. And that's a great phrase. We're going to use that. I'm here with you. Because what that does is that gives us some space between ourself and what is holding us back. It gives us some space between that. And we may also have to deal with the part that has judgment about that part that's holding us back. That part says, you shouldn't be here. So there may be a part of us who's very strong, that's very critical of that part and critical of, quote, us, because we've been so identified with that part. But we want to see that now as something inside us is holding us back. And I'm here with that. I'm looking at that without any judgment, without any condemnation. So we'll offer acceptance and compassion to that, to those parts of us that are frightened or sad, that are hurting. We'll give them the support of our attention. And the amazing thing is that just giving them that support is usually all it takes to allow that process to be completed and transformation to take place, so it's not holding us back anymore. And you can't always do that in one session because sometimes it's rather complicated. And so different aspects of it need to be dealt with at different times. But over time, you can keep visiting that and seeing what's going on. But if it's not going along for you, if you're not making that transformation, then please get in touch with me and we can have some sessions and get the thing cleared up. So that any great weight from whatever stress it might be, maybe something very small, maybe something was just ongoing, maybe something that was a traumatic experience, whatever it was that created this impression in us that is now the weight upon us, we can deal with that. And it's very effective. Pardon me. We don't have to relive it. We don't have to go through the pain of it. We just see it. We just, oh, it's there. It's there. So that's how we're going to approach it. For those of you who see this video, but don't attend to the rest of tonight's webinar as the group clearing session, please save the date for my November 9th webinar. It'll be the second Tuesday again in November, a week after Election Day. And I think it's going to be, I reserve the right to change it, but I think it's going to be on personal freedom, social responsibility, and liberation. What we're going to do is look at these concepts of personal freedom in the political discourse. This is very popular right now. But we'll look too at social obligations and responsibilities. What is it that we as people, as a member of society, are supposed to do? And we'll also look at our own sense of free will and ask, what is free and what is determined? And just work with that a little bit. I'm not going to go too far with that, but at least introduce the idea so that we can better understand the notion of what freedom is and what part of our life, if not all of it, is guided by natural law, by karma, and by our pursuit of liberation. So that's what's going to happen. That will be on November 9th. And I just made a little addendum to my plan for next month. Okay, I will stop now and see if there are any questions. You can send them to me in a chat. On the computer screen, at least, the chat box is at the bottom, near the center, just to the left of the center on my screen. If you are on a telephone, then I think you have to hit the three little dots, and then you'll get an opportunity to join the chat and you can make a comment there. So I'll give us just a couple of minutes to see if anyone has anything they want to ask or comment on in this. And then we'll get into the group clearing session where I'll deal with our problems individually and collectively. So I think this is a topic that is often not addressed out there in the world. I haven't seen other people approach it in quite this way, but it is a very, very common phenomenon, applying to just about everybody, at least to some degree in some area of your life. But there are a lot of people who walk around, and if you even look at them, sometimes you can see it in their bodies. They're kind of, they look defeated or like they're carrying a great load. And sometimes in their life, they are carrying a great load. But some people can carry a load with power and dignity, and other people, are bearing the weight heavily upon them. So I think this has a very broad application. And I'm not seeing any chats, so I'm going to draw this presentation to a conclusion. And remember, it'll be November 9th will be our next webinar.